Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into diabetes mellitus, a condition you hear about all the time. But what is it, really? What's actually going on inside the body? Let's break it down.
You know, whenever you hear about diabetes, the conversation always comes back to one thing, right? Sugar. But why is it all about sugar? Well, believe it or not, the biggest clue is hiding in plain sight, right there in the name.
Get this, mellitus is actually Latin for sweet or honey-like, and there's a wild reason for that. Way back when, doctors figured out that something was wrong because, and this is true, the urine of these patients was sweet. Yep, it was the body trying to get rid of all that extra sugar. It's a pretty strange piece of medical history, but it perfectly sets the stage for everything we're about to talk about.
Okay, but first, a super quick clarification. We are talking specifically about diabetes mellitus. You might have heard of another one called diabetes insipidus, but that's a totally different thing. It's about water balance, not sugar. So from here on out, when we say diabetes, we mean mellitus, the sweet one.
So, if the main problem is too much sugar hanging out where it shouldn't be, we gotta understand the system that's supposed to handle it, right? And that brings us to the absolute hero of this story, a little hormone called insulin.
Insulin is pretty special. It's the only hormone in your body that's hypoglycemic. Now, that's just a fancy way of saying its job is to lower your blood sugar. It's made in your pancreas, and its whole mission in life is to grab the glucose, the sugar from your food, and move it out of your blood and into your cells so they can use it for energy. You can really think of it as the body's ultimate sugar traffic controller.
So, here's how it's all supposed to go down. In a perfect world, you eat something. That food gets turned into glucose, which then enters your bloodstream. Your blood sugar starts to rise. That's the signal. Your pancreas jumps into action and releases insulin. Now, insulin is like a key. It travels all over your body, finds your cells, and literally unlocks them. Once the door is open, the glucose can get inside and be used for fuel. And just like that, with the sugar moved out of the blood, your blood sugar levels go right back to normal. It's this beautiful, elegant system.
But what happens when that elegant system breaks? That's what diabetes is. It's a breakdown. And it turns out it can break in two pretty distinct ways, which is why we have two main types of the disease.
So let's look at that. What happens when the key and lock system fails? When all that sugar is just stuck, floating around in your blood? Well, it comes down to two main problems. Think about it this way. In type 1 diabetes, it's a key problem. The body's immune system gets confused and actually attacks and destroys the factory that makes the insulin keys, the pancreas. So there are just no keys being made, an absolute lack of them. Now, in type 2 diabetes, it's more of a lock problem. The factory is still making keys. In fact, it might be working overtime, making tons of them. But the locks on the cells have gotten rusty or changed. They've become resistant. The key just doesn't fit right anymore.
And when you look at how common each one is, the difference is huge. Type 2 diabetes makes up a whopping 80 to 90% of all cases. It's by far the most common type, and it's the one we often hear about being connected to things like diet and lifestyle.
This chart really lays it all out. For type 1, you're usually looking at an onset in childhood or the teen years. The root cause, those insulin-making cells, the beta cells, are destroyed, so you have very little or just no insulin at all. But with type 2, it often shows up later in life, after 35 or so. And the problem isn't a lack of insulin, at least not at first. It's that insulin resistance we talked about. The body might even be pumping out extra insulin to try and compensate, but the cells just aren't listening.
Okay. So we've got a broken system, we've got sugar building up in the blood. How do doctors actually figure this out? What's the investigation look like?
It really starts with a simple idea. You've got to measure the sugar in the blood. And what doctors are looking for isn't just one fluke high number, but a pattern of it being too high over time. One of the go-to tests is the fasting blood sugar test. It's exactly what it sounds like. You don't eat overnight, they take a blood sample in the morning, and if that number is 126 or higher, that's a really big red flag for diabetes.
But a single test is just one snapshot, right? It's like taking one photo of a whole movie. To get the bigger picture, the most important test is something called the HbA1c. Think of it as a way to see the average blood sugar over a longer period, which is absolutely key for managing diabetes.
So how does it work? It's pretty clever. The HbA1c test actually measures how much sugar has gotten stuck to your red blood cells over the last 2 to 3 months. It gives you a percentage, and if that percentage is 6.5% or higher, that's the diagnostic line for diabetes. It tells the doctor that your blood sugar hasn't just been high today, it's been high for a while.
All right, so we know what the problem is, and we know how we measure it. But that leads us to maybe the most important question of all. So what? Why is it so bad to have high blood sugar? What does it actually do to your body over time?
Seriously, what's the big deal with a little extra sugar floating around in your blood? What's the actual damage? Well, it turns out the damage is slow, it's sneaky, it affects your whole body, and it's incredibly serious.
Here's the bottom line. Over time, high blood sugar is like poison for your blood vessels. It's abrasive, it's damaging, and it attacks the delicate inner lining of every single artery and vein from your brain to your toes. That damage, plus the fact that it messes with how your body processes fats, is what kicks off a whole avalanche of long-term complications.
And I mean it when I say it's body-wide. Let's just run through it. In your eyes, it damages the tiny vessels, causing something called retinopathy, and can lead to cataracts. Your kidneys? They get overworked trying to filter all that sugar, leading to kidney disease or nephropathy. Your heart? It causes your arteries to harden up, that's atherosclerosis, which massively jacks up the risk for heart attacks. And what's really scary is that nerve damage can make them silent attacks you don't even feel. And speaking of nerves, that same damage, especially in your feet, can cause you to lose feeling, which is why small cuts can turn into really dangerous ulcers.
Look, I know that all sounds pretty scary, and it is serious. But here's the crucial takeaway, the hopeful part. All of these things point back to one central mission: managing blood sugar. If you can control the glucose levels, you can dramatically reduce the risk of all these things happening.
So we've gone from a simple Latin word all the way to this complex dance between insulin and sugar and what happens when it all goes wrong. So it all comes down to this one last thought for you. Now that you understand a little more about how your body is designed to use energy, what's one simple choice you could make today, right now, to help that amazing system do its job? Thanks for joining me for this explainer.